What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we'll be taking a look at my current rest of season rankings, talking about the players that have risen the most over the last 2 weeks. Remember, you can see exactly where I have every player ranked under every scoring format by just looking at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So we will get into the biggest risers in a second, but first, of course, have to start things off as usual, the stat of the day. Dare has not posted the waiver wire video yet, so I'm not sure exactly what the stat of the day is from yesterday. If that's posted in time by the time I'm editing this, I will post the winners on the screen. But today's stat: just one player has over 600 receiving yards so far this season, but only one or fewer touchdowns. Who is that player? At receiving touchdowns, of course, because we're talking about a wide receiver or a tight end here. All right, as usual, we'll start off with the tight end position in these videos, and we have a few names to go over, but no real deep analysis. Usually no one really changes at the tight end position. We have two big risers because they're returning from injury: Dawson Knox and George Kittle. I've moved them basically where they were before the injury. I believe Knox is a little bit lower than he was before, just because some other tight ends have really produced when he's been away, but he's a mid-range tight end one. I think he was at 6 or 7 before. I have him at 8 right now. Knox is just a good option. Didn't have a great game in his first game back this last week, but it was his first game back, of course, and he's not going to be a guy that goes out there and produces numbers like Kelsey and Kittle and Waller when he's been playing good, but he's a guy that has touchdown upside and is going to be used in a very high-scoring offense, and so he's very valuable. Anyone in his role is going to be valuable, playing a ton of snaps, so he's right back to being a mid-range tight end one. And then Kittle, of course, I have not seen the Monday night game yet, so I don't know what's going to happen in that one, but he's right back to being a top 3 option. Returns from injury last week, performs really, really well. He's a stud. You're going to want George Kittle. The only other big riser, and this is not injury-related, was Pat Freeman. He is clearly going to have a consistent role in this offense. Loses them the game, or I guess makes them tie the game this last week. But he's going to have a red zone role. He's going to be peppered with underneath looks. Now they don't have Juju. They have Claypool missing time. They don't have, a ton of stable wide receiver options, and of course they're an offense that is just not going to push the ball downfield no matter which quarterback is starting. We saw last week that he's not going to score a touchdown every week, so he's going to still have a low floor like pretty much every tight end does, but he's going to be a really good option, so I moved him up from a high end to a low end one. I think he's going to have a really nice close to his rookie year. One of the better rookie years we're probably going to see, but it's kind of overshadowed by, of course, how well Kyle Pitts has been playing this season. At quarterback, we only have one big riser, and that's Cam Newton. I have initially moved him up to the quarterback 17. That's kind of just a guess. Now, I expect him to be the full-time starter, just starting this next week. I think he's going to start the rest of the season. I think he's going to have rushing touchdowns. I think he's going to have, of course, rushing yardage. So he's going to produce, but I don't think he goes into the category of those top 10 to 12 guys where it's these are weekly guys that you're pretty much starting regardless of matchup. I would say the top 8 or 9 actually is what you're doing that for. Once you get outside that 8, 9, 10 range, it's all streamers. That's kind of what we talk about every week, that it's really not worth going over too much who changed the quarterback position, because if you're not locked into that top 10, who cares? It's just who's got a good matchup. I think that's still where he falls. But if you asked me who would I prefer to keep on my bench, someone like Cam Newton or someone else ranked close to him but that we just know is always just a streaming option, I'd still prefer to stash Cam Newton because he has the upside. Is he good anymore? I don't think anyone truly knows. But like I say all the time, rushing production is king for fantasy for quarterbacks, and Cam's going to have that. He's going to have those scrambles, going to have those rushing touchdowns. He's going to be good in fantasy. It doesn't really matter how good he is as an actual quarterback. And let's be honest, we've had usable fantasy weeks, not recently, but more at the beginning of the season, we've had usable fantasy weeks from Sam Darnold. Well, he's better than Sam Darnold, right? Cam Newton's better than Sam Darnold. And so I think he's going to be solid to end the season, but still more of a mid-range 2. On to the running back position now, what we actually care about here. I talked last week about, I believe it was the quarterback position, how I have a new ranking of the top 5. I kind of want to start with that on the running back position because that's kind of moved around a bit. If you guys like me going over the new top 5, let me know. I'll do wide receivers next week. But if you just want to hear the risers, I won't do that. Just let me know what you want to see. But But I'll just go over the top 5 because it's moved. So top 5 running backs rest of the season right now, half PPR scoring. Christian McCaffrey, 1. Jonathan Taylor, 2. Dalvin Cook, 3. Austin Eckler, 4. Najee Harris, 5. I'm pretty locked into the top 3. CMC, Taylor, Dalvin Cook. I'm not as locked into like 4 through 7. I think those are much closer. And I'll say that Saquon finds himself right outside of that range. And if he returns this week and he goes in with like an 80% snap share, I'm probably going to move him to 4. And if he looks, fantastic, maybe move him to 3. I don't know what's going to happen. That's in the future. But I would say if he comes out and he plays 80-85% of the snaps, he's getting targets, he's getting work on the ground, he'll move up to 4. So that's just kind of my take on Saquon not being in the top 5 right now. Again, with these injuries, we are not 100% sure he's going to return this week. We're not 100% sure they're going to give him a full snap share. So until we see that, I don't want to put him in to the top 5. But at 1, again, CMC, he's back now. They ramped him up from 29 to 44 snaps this last week. He increased from 18 to 23 touches. He has now played effectively 4 full games because, of course, he gets hurt in 1 game. He has like limited time in these last 2. So he's effectively played like 4 full games, and he's already tied for 12th among running backs in receptions. He is just every week, I don't care what the matchup is, a locked-in top like 5 to 7 running back should probably just be ranked number 1 every week. And while the re-injury risk is there, especially because it was a hamstring injury, that's like one of the highest rates of re-injury, it's worth it. Like the risk is worth it. He is the number 1 running back. He is the most valuable player in fantasy from this point on. Number 2, Jonathan Taylor, at least 110 scrimmage yards and a touchdown. Both of these things come true 7 consecutive weeks. He's a stud. He's on a tear. I think he's the second most valuable player. And then we've got Dalvin Cook, ranked 3rd. He is 4th with 93 rushing yards per game. He's been really good. It's just the touchdowns aren't there, and the receptions have been a little bit lower than we're used to seeing, but he's still a little bit involved in the receiving game. He's still, again, getting 93 rushing yards per game. That's really good. The 3 touchdowns, as we talked about last week when he had 2 touchdowns, he's just getting unlucky. He's going to score touchdowns. He's going to have a ton of touchdowns to close the season. The only risk with him is, of course, this legal issue with no one here knows what's going to happen with that. Like, there are very few people who know the full details of that issue. And so since we don't know, it's a risk, but we honestly can't figure out how big of a risk it is until we learn more information. But I think having it 3 is still where he should be. After Dalvin Cook, we see Austin Eckler. He hasn't been amazing recently, but that's more in fantasy. He's been a good running back for the team. He still has a massive opportunity share of the backfield. Still gets plenty of targets, plenty of work near the goal line. He actually should have had 2 touchdowns this last week. Gets vultured for 1 of them. But he's still 3rd in half PPR points per game this season. And he's got that playoff schedule we talked about last week, where he hasn't been producing amazing. And we looked at the playoff schedule and we're like, oh, those aren't necessarily smash matchups. But the Chargers are going to be in contention to close the season. They're going to be in must-win games. And when they're in must-win games, we're expecting them to lean on Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, and Austin Eckler. And the matchups themselves were still good. They weren't necessarily the number 1 matchups, but he had really, really good matchups to go along with must-win games. I expect Eckler to close the season extremely strong. And I thought he was a great buy low. Not even buy low, just a buy. In general, just buy Austin Eckler last week. I just think he's a top 5 running back. I have him at 4. He may have jumped, I actually don't know the PPR rankings. He may be jumped over Dalvin Cook in PPR, but you'd have to check the website. For that one, I don't know off the top of my head. Then finally, at 5, Najee Harris. He is just getting all the snaps and touches he can handle. His touch counts over the last 5 weeks, 25, 30, 29, 25, 30. Like, obviously, we prefer better quarterback play, a better offense, more scoring opportunities, but it doesn't matter. If your floor is 25 touches with work in the receiving game, and if they ever do finally get close, he's going to be the guy they use. He's a stud guy to be a top 5 running back. And so, again, Saquon right outside that range. If he comes out 80-85% of the snaps, I'll probably move him up to 4, and that would be your top 6. So, again, let me know if you guys want like an update on wide receivers. Next week, even though it's a followers video, I can go over who the top 5 is, kind of why they're in that range. But if you only want the risers, let me know that as well. So for the risers, we'll start off with James Conner, my arch nemesis, it seems. I feel like a lot of you think that I just hate James Conner. I don't hate James Conner. I just know that he's been historically lucky with touchdowns this season. If you look at expected touchdowns, it is not often that we see a running back surpassing their expected touchdowns by such a large number. Even this last week does absolutely nothing all game, garbage time touchdown. That's just the whole story with James Conner this season is he doesn't do all that much, then he scores a touchdown, right? He had that one explosion week 2 weeks ago. Other than that, hasn't been fantastic, but I think he's leading the league in touchdowns. I think he has 11. Don't quote me on that, but I believe he's either first or second in total touchdowns this season. But I had to move him up a ton in the rest of these rankings because high ankle sprains. We always avoid high ankle sprains and hamstring injuries, especially for running backs, and that's what Chase Edmonds has. So I'm expecting Edmonds to be out for a good amount of time, and even when he returns, it's going to be a while for him to be 100%. And if you're getting that portion of time of James Conner being effectively a feature back, they're going to mix in Eno Benjamin, but it's really going to be more to spell James Conner, try and keep him healthy. James Conner's going to have a massive workload, not a ton of receptions, more receptions than he had before, but plenty of receptions to be viable in fantasy from that standpoint. Plus all these touchdowns, yeah, of course he's going to be extremely valuable in any weeks that Chase Edmonds misses. So that's my full take there. But yeah, just that's why he's moving up is you hate to see high ankle sprains. And I really do think Chase Edmonds is going to miss a good amount of time and not even be 100% when he returns. That's why you have to move Conner up. And also, Eno Benjamin. Eno Benjamin needs to be owned everywhere because Conner himself has struggled to stay healthy over his career. Well, what happens now if James Conner got injured? Now you're out Conner, you're out Edmonds. You have Eno Benjamin now as a feature back. This is just like I talked about last week. One of the portions of the running back trade targets video was talking about backups. Just saying, if you can't really afford to be trading for running back one, you need to trade for or acquire through free agency, if they run free agency for some reason, running backs who have a path to doing that. Well, Eno Benjamin has a path to doing that. I highlighted Ingram and A.J. Dillon last week as the best two options if Kamara got hurt, if Aaron Jones got hurt. Obviously, I didn't know both of them were going to get hurt, and now we've got Ingram as close to running back one, Dillon for any weeks that I haven't actually heard what the full injury is going to be with Aaron Jones. I think they're going to kind of figure that out on Monday, so maybe you guys know already. But any weeks that Jones misses, Dillon's going to be a running back one. You just got to find running backs like that, like Stevenson, like Eno Benjamin. Now, if Conner got hurt, he's going to be a stud. So Eno Benjamin goes up in the rankings. You're going to want to get him on your rosters because even though he's not super valuable when Conner's healthy, you can't guarantee that Conner's going to stay healthy. I've also moved David Montgomery up a lot of spots, the running back 17. Of course, a few weeks ago, he was still on the IR. I was 100% wrong on this one. I really thought Khalil Herbert had played so well in his replacement that, well, they'd try and keep Dave Montgomery healthy because he's still their best running back. But I thought they'd try and keep him healthy because Herbert's still good. Herbert is absolutely still worth getting touches. He deserves some touches. I thought they would mix both running backs in. Did not happen. Montgomery returns. He was close to a feature back. I believe he played 85% of the snaps, had 15 touches. And again, that's his first week back. Then they go on bye. He's going to be 100% healthy coming off of the bye. You have to think he maintains that 85 to 90% snap share. And if that's the case, yeah, he's a running back too. It could move up. Let's say he goes out there and he has 90% snap share, 20 plus touches, work in the receiving game. I might move him up to a low end one. But until we see that, this is still the Bears, and there's still that chance maybe out of the bye they still want to give Herbert a little bit of work, and he stays in that 75 to 80% range most of the season. On the Bears, that would keep him more as a mid-range too. So I still want to see one more week before I move him up even further because there's still a lot of good running backs ranked ahead of him. A.J. Dillon, alluded to that one before, up 13 spots, running back 21, but again, I don't know 100% how long Aaron Jones is going to miss. Technically, to me, it's possible he doesn't miss any time. Again, I don't know yet. It hasn't come out yet. But for any weeks that Aaron Jones misses, Dillon's a running back 1. And even while Jones was healthy, Dillon was still getting a workload and it was still viable as like a low-end starting option. I had started him the last week because I had to. Of course, you'd prefer if you had 2 better options than A.J. Dillon, but the point remains, he was viable. He was okay to use as like a fill-in for injuries, for bye weeks, and he's got this upside to be a league winner if Jones misses significant time. So move him up to 21. If it comes out that Jones is going to miss like over a month, well, then I'm going to move him even higher than this. If it comes out he's only going to miss a week or 2, I'll move him a little bit lower. It's just going to depend on the news. You guys can watch the rankings, see how they adjust. I've also moved Carson up 10 spots, running back 25. He seems extremely likely to return this week. It seemed like he was very, very close last week, but they just wanted one more week before activating him. So I expect him to return this week. And he should fairly easily regain that number 1 role. No one really produced fantastic in his absence. They kind of used a rotation. No one really like came away as like a clear guy that just has to get a workload now that Carson is back. He wasn't a stud in his first 2 healthy games, but he was pretty good in week 1. He scores 2 touchdowns in week 2. Like, he was good. But he also faced the Colts and the Titans, who we now know, well, we knew the Colts were going to be a fantastic run defense. They're one of the 5, most difficult matchups for running backs. We now know the Titans defense is playing really well. So he had 2 difficult matchups to start the season, was still good in fantasy. Like, he's good. Chris Carson is the best running back on the Seahawks, and assuming he's good to go, he's easily going to be a running back 2. The only reason that I don't have him right now in where he'll probably end up if he's healthy is in that like 16 to 18 range. It's kind of tough to know 100% because I want to see it first. But the only reason that he's not there right now is, well, I'm not 100% sure he's going to return this week. And then I don't know if they're going to ease him in. Like, it's definitely possible that coming off of this injury, especially with them saying that it could have been a longer term injury, maybe they only give him like 55% of the snaps. And they still use Alex Collins. They still use some of their third down backs, in which case, he should be in that like mid-20s for running backs. But of course, if he goes out there, plays 70% of the snaps, handles, 16, 17, 18 touches, he's running back 2. And he's going to go into that like 16 to 18 range. But until I see that happen, I'm not 100% sure it's going to happen. And so we're just going to have to wait and see on that one. Have him at 25 again right now. Another big mover was Devonta Freeman up to the running back 36. I'm still a little bit hesitant to move him any higher than that because once Latavius Murray returns, we're not 100% sure what the split's going to be. It's pretty obvious that Freeman is ahead of Le'Veon Bell and he's ahead of Tyson Williams. That's pretty clear. And again, once Latavius is back, is it going to go to a 50-50 split? And they haven't really been willing to like feature only 2 running backs in like a significant portion of this offense. This offense has been much more centered around Lamar Jackson and the passing game this season than in past seasons. That obviously has something to do with the talent of their running backs. They've had phenomenal run games in the past. Now they're relying on guys they don't fully trust that aren't fantastic. And so, of course, when Lamar's also playing really well, it makes all the sense in the world to lean more pass heavy, especially when you've got Bateman now, you've got Marquise Brown having a breakout season, you've got Mark Andrews, like you've got more talent than you had in the pass in the receiving game and less talent in the running game. It makes more sense for them to go more pass heavy. And so when Latavius returns, is it going to be a 50-50 split of them both getting like 9 touches a game? Maybe. And so even though right now I do think Freeman is a little bit more valuable in running back 36, there's that risk still there, and the upside's not there. Like, there's just no world in which, no matter where the injuries come from, if like Latavius misses the rest of the season and Tyson Williams is out for the year, what is Freeman, like 30th best running back now? Like, he just has no upside. And so even though I've moved him up to 36 just because he's getting touches and he's a running back, like any running back getting touches right now has value, I don't really think I can move him up too much higher, and I'm still not overly excited about him rest of the season. Final running back riser is Rhamondre Stevenson. You guys hear my Stevenson take like every single week. I basically just complain about why they're giving Damian Harris so many touches when they have Stevenson just sitting on the bench. Stevenson's a better running back than Damian Harris. He gives them the upside to not know for certain, oh, this is clearly like either, a Harris run or like a play action, right? We're not throwing to Harris. No, put Stevenson in there. You can throw to Stevenson. You can do more things with the offense. It just makes it harder on the defense. Plus, he's better. He's more elusive. You can use him in the receiving game, which helps your offense be more efficient. Stevenson's just better. He's just a better running back than Damian Harris. And I don't know why it took this long for them to finally feature him. The problem is you can't just assume that he's the guy now, right? Harris is probably going to return this week. He's probably, honestly, my take is he's probably going to regain the lead role and that they're just going to have it be like a 55-45% split between Harris and Stevenson. Stevenson probably overtakes all the work that Brandon Bolden was kind of getting before, and it's more of just a pure two running back split. But this is also the Patriots. We could easily see them go back to a 3 running back split. Stevenson's still only getting like 35 to 40% of the snaps. Random who gets the goal line touches, and if he ever fumbles, he misses the rest of the game. That is absolutely in the cards, and so I've moved him up. But it's not like I moved him up to running back 2. He's still a lower end option and still someone that I honestly am going to have a difficult time ranking each week until we see what they're going to do when Harris is back. On to wide receivers, where there's not a whole lot of movement at the top. There's a little bit of movement outside the top 30, but the only riser, more than like, 1 or 2 spots, which is kind of like randomness a little bit. The only riser more than just like tiny movements in the top 30 is Keenan Allen. Mike Williams began the season in the Michael Thomas role. They have since changed their mind on what they want to do as far as that's concerned, and they've gone back to using Mike Williams as a deep threat, as someone they use down the field, with Keenan Allen soaking up basically all of those like short and intermediate looks with some looks downfield, but like he's not that great of a deep threat, and so those don't usually hit. That's resulted in just over 5 targets per game for Williams over the last month compared to 10 targets per game for Keenan Allen. The results haven't really been there for the offense. Like since this move, they've lost 3 of 4. They just haven't looked as explosive. They looked really good to start the year when they were using Mike Williams in this role. As they've shifted to giving more underneath work to Keenan Allen, to not giving as many deeper targets and targets in general to Mike Williams, the offense doesn't look as good. And now we can't really say that that's the reason because it's such a small sample size. It's worth noting. Now, I don't think they're going to go back to what they did before, and so I think this is a downgrade to Mike Williams, upgrade to Keenan Allen, but this doesn't mean that Keenan Allen is all of a sudden a wide receiver 1, right? He still only gets these underneath looks. It takes him a lot of targets to really get there each week, and we know the touchdown upside is not there with Keenan Allen. I've just moved him up because the targets are increasing, and his floor is getting higher, and he's being used more, which means he's going to be more valuable. I've also moved Hunter Renfrow up to the wide receiver 33. He has exactly 9 targets in each of the 2 games post Henry Ruggs. This is like realistically as high as I can really move him up. I mean, I don't think he's viable as a wide receiver 2, but if he's going to see, 8 to 10 targets, going to be used in the red zone because of like how good of a route runner he is in that area, I think he's worth it as like a running back 30 to 35. I think that's a good range for him. Captures that ceiling if he scores a touchdown. It's going to come with 6-7 receptions, but it comes with the understanding that, how many times is he going to have 100 yards? Will he? I mean, to close the season, will he have a game with 100 yards? Maybe not. And so he's got a stable floor. He's got an okay ceiling when he scores, but I think running back 30-35 is a good range for him. Rashod Bateman, also up to the wide receiver 38. He's averaged 7 targets per game in his first 4 NFL games, and it's pretty obvious that he's their second best wide receiver behind Marquise Brown. He's only been playing 55% to 65% of the offensive snaps since they like to rotate other receivers in, but that just means that there's room for his role to grow. Like he was out there getting 100% of the snaps, getting these 7 targets. You'd be like, okay, probably not going to see that increase, right? We're probably not going to see them shift too much of a workload away from Marquise Brown, too much away from Mark Andrews, and if he's out there every snap, this is kind of what we're going to see. But he has room to grow in these snaps, get on the field more, and it's pretty clear he's a better wide receiver than the trash they have behind Sammy Watkins, and he's better than Sammy Watkins. So to close the season, could we see both Marquise Brown and Rashod Bateman as full-time wide receivers, and that would expand Bateman closer to like 8 or 9 targets per game, with some of those coming deep downfield, some of those coming in the red zone? Maybe. And because that exists, and because of, like I'll talk about in a second, rookie wide receivers tend to break out in the second half of the season, and he was injured to start the season, so his second half of the season is not even here yet. I think he's a really, really good upside have on your bench. Someone that maybe you're not playing right now because you probably have better wide receiver options, but someone I definitely would like to have on my bench. And the last riser today, Elijah Moore. I was very high on him this summer and was extremely disappointed with how they used him to start the season. But they're finally giving him a chance. They're not still using him correctly at this point. They should have traded away Jamison Crowder at the trade deadline, made Elijah Moore full-time in the slot unless they're not using a slot receiver, and then put him on the outside. But he should have been their full-time slot receiver. They should have been giving him more targets. I don't really know what they were doing to start the season. There's still risk here that Zach Wilson is just awful, and that for some reason he just cannot work this offense, because Elijah Moore has been breaking out since Wilson went down. He was awful when Wilson was starting quarterback. Since these backups have come in, they're throwing the ball to Elijah Moore because he's their best wide receiver. And so what's going to happen? When Zach Wilson returns, I don't know. But he's got at least 6 targets in 4 straight weeks, 4 touchdowns in those 4 games, and he's done that against 4 really good defenses. Patriots, Bengals, Colts, and Bills. Those are really, really strong defenses. That's a brutal stretch. Coming up, he's got Dolphins, Texans, Eagles. That is not exactly the most difficult of opponents, right? And so we could see him really, really start to break out. And again, like I said before, and like I said a few weeks ago when we talked about Devonta Smith, you can't compare every rookie wide receiver to Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is a freak. Jamar Chase was just, the best prospect we've seen in such a long time. He was 100% chance going to break out. You can't compare everyone to that. Smith and Elijah Moore are still having really good rookie seasons, and usually rookies don't break out right away. They usually break out in the second half of the season, which is starting now, right? And we're starting to see Devonta Smith and Elijah Moore really get going. It could be really nice for them to close the season. So don't give up on Elijah Moore. Hopefully, when Zach Wilson does return, he throws the ball to Elijah Moore. But there's still that risk there. So obviously, I didn't move him up to wide receiver 2, but he's increased a good amount in the rankings. And like with Bateman, I really, really want to have guys like that on my bench because they have a lot of upside in the second half of the season. So those are my biggest risers in the rest of season rankings over the last 2 weeks. Remember, you can see my complete rest of season rankings, which again, as I've alluded to in previous videos, can now be used as a trade calculator. So if you're asking me all these trade questions, all you have to do is look at the rest season rankings. They have a number next to their name. That's the number I assign for their value. Add up the values and just see if you're getting a better value than your opponent. All that again at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.